There are multiple other collars in the collar chapter. I'd like you to do a total of 5 to turn in. I'll put pictures up of the ones I've done, but you may choose collars. Just make sure they're all different from each other. And there's a number of different kinds. And I'm going to go over a Mandarin collar with you, just so you understand the concept. So when you're doing a Mandarin collar, instead of drawing your front and back on the page, instead of doing that, you're going to use your back and your front, and we'll measure the distance of the back neck and the distance of the front neck. So I will start by putting a line on the paper, and we might as well zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I've got a straight line, and I want to start from the center back, so I'm going to put a perpendicular line where the center back is. I also want my collar to finish 1 inch tall for this, so I'm also going to mark the beginning of that back here. So this is my center back fold. So the next thing I need to mark is where my shoulder notch is from the center back. So I'm going to measure it, but what I'm doing is basically walking this along here, and I will put my shoulder notch the length of that back neck. And we've measured that before, and it's 1 inch and 5/8 plus a 1/16, I think. Yeah, that's what mine is. So that's right here. So that's where my shoulder notch aligns on this pattern, and then on the front we're measuring from the shoulder on the front. This is called walking. Sometimes walking is easier. I've broken many a ruler trying to curve it along with this, but we'll measure it too. The best way to measure these is with a measuring tape, and then you would turn the measuring tape on its side like that. And a measuring tape is nice and bendy. And I had one out here a while ago, but we know how that is. Okay, so 1. Sometimes it's hard to get it to hold still, so I'm going to put a little mark. There's 1 inch, and 2.5. So mine is 2.5. Most of the patterns I work with in a work setting, if it's my basic pattern, I'll go around and measure all of those things and just write them down so they're handy anytime I want to know them. Okay, so 2.5 is where my center front is. So I could make this a rectangle shape and then just cut it out and pin it in the neck and make adjustments to it, which is often what I end up doing, because it depends on the bone structure and posture of the person you're putting this on, the way it really needs to fit. But I'll finish up by showing you what the book says to do. If I'm making a fitted collar specifically for the person, I will just cut this out in a single layer, and I think I have pictures that go with that. I'll cut this out in a single layer, but I'll add seam allowance, and I'll sew the bottom neckline edge into the collar of the finished blouse. And then I'll come along while it's on them and I'll clip it. And I'll overlap it or spread it depending on what shape I want it to take. And I'll tape it closed, so it might end up coming around and coming up and then curving again, depending on the way the person, actually that's usually the way it looks. It's kind of a strange little thing. But it depends on the person and where their neck is. So then I will just copy that as my collar pattern and cut it out again and make sure that it works. But the one in the book, what they're having you do is another really good best guess. For half scale, you would measure up 1/4 of an inch right here. Full scale, you would measure up 1/2. And then you would curve this into this space. Where's my compass? You would curve that so that it's coming up and blending back down here at about the middle, but you'll curve it up slightly. And then when it's curved up slightly, you'll take your ruler and line it up so you've got a right angle right there, and you'll extend that up. So you won't be using the original lines anymore. You'll have this curve. And because we're having it be 1 inch finished, fix that. So this blends into that, and then you would just measure up 1 inch, and that would be your collar shape. The way the book explains doing a Mandarin collar. But as with everything else, there are multiple ways of getting there. This is just the flat pattern best guess that's in the book. The important thing is that you have, this is the center back measure, the back neck measurement and the front neck measurement, and your design edge, and it comes at a right angle, and the front curves a little bit. And this will fit some people. So it just depends on whether you're making a costume, a personal pattern, or something for the factory. And on this one, we would have no seam allowance down the center back. You would add your seam allowance all the way around, and this one would also be cut to on the fold. And if you wanted to, you could make an under collar that was slightly smaller. But that's your Mandarin. No seam allowance down the fold. And when you sew this one together, you would sew this part together, and then once you've sewn the two collars together, then you would sew the neckline and edge in. And it might be slightly confusing just because the curve is going the opposite direction. And that's another interesting thing. You've got your sailor collar, and your flat Peter Pan collar, and then this other collar, and that's kind of the way they relate to each other. The neckline is the same way, but this collar stands up where the others lay flat, and they all sew into the same place. So you will learn more if you sew some together. And that finished picture would be one of those. You can also add little teeth to it.